When I was growing up, most of my best friends were adults. They were my family. They weren't complete strangers. My uncle and my aunt Selena and my mom and my dad and all my relatives, all these older people that I always wanted to be around. There was so much wisdom and ideas, and I spent most of my time with them than with other kids. And they'd always drop little nuggets of knowledge all the time and these pithy little comments. And I remember once my uncle, we were watching this show, and the ending happened exactly the way he predicted it. And he was like, "There's a word for that." And I was like, "There's a word for what?" And he said, "What just happened?" He said, "That's supposed to happen that way." And I said, "What's the word?" And he said, "Kismet." I'm like, "Well, what the heck does that mean?" And he goes, "It's when things just work out, man." And I think of those kind of experiences as and those family members as I grew up, a lot of failures that I've had and successes. And I remember my ma, who's not my mother, but my grandmother, but she didn't want to be referred to as grandma because she was so young and beautiful to the day she died. And I remember going to see her, visit her when I was a freshman in college, and I was just nothing was working out for me. I was not doing well in my classes. I just was running off to just hang out in museums and go to shows, and just nothing was really fitting, and the world around me just seemed like it was in complete turmoil. I mean, this is, we're in Iraq, my mom was actually there, she's a soldier, my dad was working all the time, so those best friends that I had weren't really there. That support system that I was so used to for wisdom and for everything just wasn't around. And I remember my second semester of that freshman year, I went to see my grandmother, and I was telling her, how rough things were, and she just kind of was like, you'll do better the next time. It'll be fine. Everything's gonna be okay. And she says, but you have to remember that what you say is important. What you do is important. Your ideas are important. You have to remember to be true to yourself and be consistent all the time. You have to be your authentic self all the time. And I think about her all the time. That was actually the last conversation we ever had. That summer she passed away, and it was really hard. And I never really kind of coped with that. I wasn't crying. I wasn't talking to anybody about it. I just kind of kept it to myself. But I think about her all the time. And I remember being in this room on a day that will live in infamy, November 8th, 2016. And I think some folks who are here right now were here that night, and it was for an election watch party where everybody thought one person was going to win, and then someone else won. So they're all, the libations are coming out of the ceiling, everybody's drinking, they're excited, yeah, we're going to crush this guy. And then slowly the numbers start to come in, and the guy's not getting crushed, and in fact, the exact opposite is happening. And I just kept thinking about, what are we gonna do next? My first thought was, let's just get back to work. How do we organize and fight back? And I remember standing by the bar, because I was one of those folks who were just hey, let's celebrate. He's done. He's gonna go quietly into the night. And I remember seeing the mood shift so overwhelmingly. And for anybody who was here that night, you remember that everyone who was screaming and excited and drinking, the drinking became more soothing the pain, and how do we deal with this horror that we're about to go through. And I remember the room kind of parted, almost like Moses in the Red Sea kind of thing, and everybody that was in the main kind of dance area or whatever just kind of slowly started to get too drunk and get Ubers home and hang out outside. And there were folks crying and screaming into their phones, calling their relatives, how could this happen? And I remember seeing somebody across the room who was still standing there, while everybody else was almost kind of giving up on the experience and just looking at their phone. And I felt like I knew what they were doing. I felt like they were what are we gonna do next kind of thing? Let's get back to work and fight back. And I remember thinking, I could just look into this person's eyes and I know exactly what they're feeling, and that's how I was feeling. How do we get to work? And I had never met this person before in my entire life, and I walked over to her, and I reached my hand out, and I said, you should come with me outside, we should talk. And by the way, don't ever do that because it traditionally doesn't work. But for whatever reason, she took my hand and she followed me outside. And we stood outside, and I just didn't know what to say. I was kind of drunk. She was visibly sober, so that's a already awkward moment, And I'm trying to compose myself, and all right, I'm good. All right. And I looked at her, and the first thing I noticed when I looked into her eyes was there was a necklace around her neck. And it was this bird with these wings sticking out. And I looked at her and I said, I feel like that's really important to you. What does that mean? So my exact words. And she says, it means good words, good thoughts, and good deeds. And I immediately felt like I found someone that was like me. I found my tribe, if you will. And I said, there's a word for that. And I remembered all that wisdom. And I looked at her and I said, there's a word for that. And she says, what's the word? And I said, it's Kismet. Thank you.